Hello, I'm the podcast without fear, Luke.
I'm the Uncanny Ryan.
I am Kylie the Pooh-Dinger.
I am the superior Caitlin.
And I am the agitated Kyle.
And
we are most of the Nerddom Podcast.
Podcast.
Every Friday, some variation of this group gets together and talks about all things nerd.
The newest stuff in TV, movies, comics, video games, and more.
So join us in the Dome every Friday to hear all things nerd.
From a bunch of people who are probably a bit too into it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Nerd Dome Presents the Contest of Champions. It's a new game show from the Geek Nerd Network where we pit some of our expert nerds from multiple shows in one place, and they discuss and argue over certain topics, ranging from sci-fi nerd stuff to TV shows and everything in between. It's a fun time. I hope you guys are going to like this. This is episode 1. So if it's a little rough, just deal with us. We'll get better. I am your host, Luke Hunsaker from the Nerd Dome podcast. And first, I would like to introduce our 2 contestants for tonight. First, also from the Nerd Dome podcast, we have the Uncanny Ryab.
Hello. I
Yes.
am Uncanny Ryab.
And from the Fandom podcast, we have Brendan Ushio.
Thanks for having me on. I feel like I'm outnumbered by Nerddom here, but we're good.
There's just 2
It's
of
just
us.
2 to... It's not. It's 2 to 2.
It's 2v2. It's okay.
Well, we haven't introduced the other fandoms. So.
Exactly.
saying.
What a great segue. The way that we are going to score this this contest of champions is we bring on 3 judges that are going to take the merits of the conversation and give us our winner. So first up, we have from the Fandom podcast, Nick.
Hey, don't I have a title too? I mean, you did Uncanny Ryab. You did Brandon.
Is Brandon a title now?
I guess
It's
Brandon-
become so ubiquitous. It's a title.
Because
You
I
are
am
the Brandon.
I am the legendary anchorman, Nick English.
And from the Tales from the Comic Shop podcast, we have Mr. Joe Bryan.
Hello. La la la.
He's so happy to be here. He's singing. And finally, from the Kiss Your Franchise Goodbye podcast, we have Andy.
Hello, I'm Andy and I like to party.
I'm Luke and I also like to party.
I like to boogie.
I'm
I like to move it.
I'm
move
Dave
it.
and I'm the stuntman.
Okay, so for our first episode, the topic is going to be, did Gene Roddenberry's rules help or hinder Star Trek? The way that we do this is we're going to give each of our contestants 3 5-minute segments to argue their case. At the end, we will allow the judges to ask any clarifying questions, and then we jump into the results, what everyone sees. Okay, Ryan. So before we jump into this, will you give the listeners a brief overview of the Roddenberry Rules?
Yeah. So Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, had certain guidelines, certain rules, certain things that he set up. That, for example, crewmates couldn't have conflicts that lasted more than an episode, or things had to be based on science, like a well-regarded science fact and not fantasy, and things of that nature, where the guidelines that he had to set up the show, and those became colloquially known as the Roddenberry Rules, and they were actually written into the show Bibles of some of the shows.
Awesome. Cool. And so with that, we will have Brandon start off. Brandon, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, your 5 minutes begins now.
All right. Well, I love Star Trek. And before we talk about anything else, I think it's important that I point out just how much I love Star Trek. It's consistently one of my top fandoms. It doesn't matter what's come out or what I'm into. Star Trek's always right up there at the top. Star Trek inspired my career in technology. It's helped me to learn about problem solving. It even, it has forced me to constantly examine and evaluate the morals that I hold dear. For those reasons, I'm really glad that we are not arguing about Star Trek or even the ideals that it inspired, but the rules and the implementation of those rules that Gene Roddenberry created and put in place. So it's really hard, and kind of what Ryab was saying at the beginning there, it's really hard to nail down specifically what the rules are exactly, because it changes a lot. Depending on who you talk to and which show Bible you're looking at, it changes. Some of the rules only ever really existed in the mind of Gene Roddenberry. I really love Star Trek, and it's changed my life in so many different ways. It inspired a career in technology. It helped me to learn how to problem solve. It has made me examine my morals and make sure that I know what I have decided and why I'm doing what I do. And for those reasons, I am really glad that I'm actually not arguing about Star Trek tonight. I'm not arguing about the ideals that it inspired. I'm not arguing about whether the show is good or has good characters or anything like that. Specifically, what we are arguing about tonight, and Ryan mentioned them, are the rules and the implementation of the rules that the creator Gene Roddenberry put into place. Now, the implementation is really important, because some of these rules never existed anywhere except for in Gene Roddenberry's head. There are different show Bibles and different guides for people submitting spec scripts that have shown different rules in place. However, there are a few rules that are pretty hard and fast for the Star Trek universe. And because of a lot of interviews and firsthand accounts from actors and writers, we know that there is definitely a rule about contention among the members of the Federation not being allowed, or if it is there, it is resolved really quickly. This is something that is really important in the Star Trek world. There's other rules about science, and there's anti-space pirate rules, which I find hilarious that there was an anti-space pirate rule, but that's beside the point. I really like that there are these rules, and I appreciate a system of rules. However, the problem with these rules creates issues with Star Trek that, to be honest, I may not have noticed, except for Star Trek taught me to constantly reevaluate my morals. There are three main problems that I see. The first three problems that I see with these rules are: first, they stifle creativity. Second, they actually make a mockery of the idea of infinite diversity in infinite combinations, which is a phrase that Gene Roddenberry believed. And I'm also glad we are not going again arguing about what Gene Roddenberry believed, but actually the rules and how they were implemented. And he believed in that, and he created that saying for Star Trek. And actually, his wife at the time started a jewelry line that tied to that. But the way the rules were implemented actually makes a mockery of that. So then, third, they promote and instill nationalism and racism in such a subtle way that it's actually really dangerous, because good people completely miss it, but it radicalizes a lot of the people that are exposed to it. I don't think I need to argue too much about how Roddenberry's rules have stifled creativity. We have pretty clear examples of what can come when you don't have those rules, because we had a Star Trek series called Deep Space Nine that primarily came out after Gene Roddenberry's death, after he was no longer in charge of the Star Trek franchise. And you get episodes like Pale Moonlight, where the captain in that show is struggling with the morals and the morality of war and the good of the one versus the good of the many, but in a way that really hits home to people. He's got this thing that he needs to do, but he can't do it because he's a Federation officer, but he needs to do it to save other Federation lives. And I'm not going to spoil it in case anybody hasn't seen it, but it is an episode that really thrives on that conflict. There are other issues in Star Trek Discovery that thrives on the conflict. Star Trek Picard thrives on the conflict. These are great Star Trek series that we have been able to see what you can do
30 seconds.
when there is conflict between members of the Federation. And this is how creativity is supported, by allowing that conflict. So I've got 10 seconds, so I will give that back to the audience.
All right. That was awesome. Okay. Ryan, are you ready for your opening?
Yes.
And go.
Like Brandon, Star Trek has very much influenced my life. I've used this phrase before if you've ever listened to other shows that I've been on, but that it has shaped the paradigm through which I view the world. So it's very near and dear to me. I think the rules, while they could be stifling at sometimes, actually helped create consistency and really steady the show. There are certain rules like that don't use the breakdown of technology as a sole source of creating jeopardy, and the episodes that are like that are just not great. The rules of things must be based in science. When you have the technology that's in there that's just based in science, and the things that are going on in the show, it inspires real life scientists, real life engineers, and pushes them in directions that kind of go to that kind of thing. If you're basing it on some kind of widely accepted theory, instead of taking a left turn into fantasy and basing it on nothing, and it might make for a fun thing, but it doesn't have the same impact and the same inspiration to our culture. If I don't think we'd have that if you didn't have that rule, or the rule of no crew conflict. While it could be that the conflict in the Federation as a whole was allowed, and conflict between admirals and stuff, it gets unpleasant when the crew as itself, who's that operating unit, is in constant conflict, as Discovery kind of showed. So specifically in the rule of don't using technology, a breakdown of technology to create jeopardy, the rule that he put in the TNG show Bible is, our people are the best and brightest, and our technology is tried and proven. And if you look back at overall the shows, the best rated episodes are consistently ones with character-driven stories and important social issues, not that they got stuck in the transporter accident or they got stuck in the holodeck. Those may be fun, but their best shows, the one that impacts us the most, are the ones that are the character-driven ones. There are some notable exceptions to that, but they're because that they raise those issues of character development and moments to drive conflict, not the malfunction itself. Like in the episodes with Moriarty in Next Generation, where he became sentient and it was a holodeck problem, but that he became a character and it was a character-driven moment. Or Janeway murdering Tuvix. That character was an interesting thing, and it was a transporter accident that merged two characters together, and they ended up in the end deciding to separate them. But that was a huge moral dilemma, not so much focused on the problems with the technology itself. The ones where it was really bad, is widely accepted, as like the Voyager episode Threshold, where they go past warp 10 because of a problem, and then they mutate, and it was just a weird, dumb episode that's really one of the more poor ones that fans generally go to. There's another Voyager episode called The Fight, where Chakotay gets knocked out in the holodeck and then starts hallucinating, and then it's the problems with the holodeck that are the focus of that episode, and it's not something memorable or something that's hitting speaks to anybody. Voyager's Fairhaven episodes, while they were fun, they're just not that character driven. They're not that emotionally impactful, where they're just on the holodeck all the time doing the holodeck stuff. That is my first argument.
All right. Brandon, for your second segment.
All right. So I mentioned there were three arguments, the first one being a creativity argument, and the second one is being that these rules make a mockery of the idea of infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So this is something that phrase, like so many other phrases in pop culture, is something that sounds beautiful, but actually means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Although the concept of it, like as you and I and any sane person listens to it, we think that is about inclusivity, and that's what it should promote. However, it's not what they've promoted on Star Trek, and that's not even what it means. So let me ask you a question. How many numbers are there?
All of them.
All of them. How many numbers? Like, if you had to put a number on that, how many numbers would all of them be?
Infinite.
Okay, so they're infinite. So there's an infinite amount of numbers. How
Yes.
many negative numbers are there?
Infinite.
How many positive numbers?
Infinite.
So how many
There's
decimal
even
places?
infinite imaginary numbers.
Yeah, there's infinite rational numbers, infinite imaginary numbers. How many decimal places are there in pi?
All of them.
It's infinite.
Yes.
It goes on forever. So the numbers are infinite, but so we have an infinite amount of numbers. However, you can also take a segment of those numbers, and that's infinite as well. And like Ryan told us, you can take a single number and make that infinite also. So just like that, the diversity in Star Trek, which is infinite, becomes much more limited because it does not have to be everything. It is a limited subset. So let's look at the original series and some of the things that we see with some diversity there. Scotty, he is a Scotsman. He is a diverse character on this crew. He has a cultural heritage, and as part of his dress uniform, he gets to wear a tartan, which expresses that diversity. However, I never saw Uhura wearing any traditional African garb. I never saw Sulu, who is technically Japanese according to the wiki, and is played by a Japanese character. I never saw him wear anything Japanese, let alone anything actually Asian, that indicated cultural significance to them. Sulu's not even a surname from anywhere in Asia. According to George Takei, who played him, the name was based from the Sea of Sulu, which touches many of the countries in Asia. And so Sulu's character was supposed to represent all of Asia, which is an enormous continent with millions and millions of people. Probably billions. I should have done some research. I'll give you that one. But this is all being represented by one character. So the diversity is shrunk down to one character.
It's 4.4 billion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and even going to, just like imaginary numbers, there are imaginary races in Star Trek. So Bones, he frequently calls Spock, who is non-human, a green-blooded hobgoblin. And, it's funny. It's a laugh. It gets played off like a joke. And I mean, it makes sense because after all, it's fine when I call my friends by their racial slur names. We get a good laugh out of it, right? No, we don't. So there's no real diversity in Star Trek. And when we do have diversity, it's used as a joke. When we do have diversity, it's
30
European
seconds.
cultures that have that. We don't get to see any minorities in the sense of skin tone proudly displayed their heritage. We are told through Star Trek, that the only minorities that are good minorities are the ones that have been assimilated. Thank you.
Ryan, are you ready for your second segment?
I am.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, for my second rule, the rule was, and again, I found it in the Next Generation Show Bible, science fiction is based on an extrapolation of generally accepted scientific fact or theory. Fantasy, which our format does not permit, need to have no basis in reality. And as I was saying earlier, it's really cool to me. One of my favorite things about Star Trek is how it has inspired real world technological advancements. The wireless communicators, we have cell phones now that are almost smaller and identical in many ways to their communicators that they used in the original series. And we even have Bluetooth little widgets that go in our ears, like Uhura has, or even like I have a facsimile comm badge that connects to my phone. That works exactly like the comm badges in Star Trek. And I love that kind of thing. Warp drive. We have an actual scientist in Mexico making a warp drive called the Alcubierre warp drive, based on a bunch of Einstein's field equations, hypothetical solutions to that. People have investigated hyposprays, doing medications topically and through the skin, and not like they had in Star Trek, or replicators or transporters. We can actually move an atom from one spot to another, just like a transporter can now, in very limited ability. that when you remove that, I think it hinders some of our ability, our creativity, and inspiration that we have to actual real world things. For example, in Discovery, they have a mushroom drive, which is it's powered by these mythical mushrooms that then they instantaneously transport from one spot to another, following the mushroom network that flows throughout the universe. And they have to have a tardigrade, which is a real creature, and to navigate this mushroom network. But then it turns to tardigrade, and then they have to use something called horizontal gene transfer, which is a real thing, but it doesn't happen in tardigrades. So basically, it equates it to they take in the mushrooms inside their body, use their DNA to then translate and navigate like the mushrooms do. So it's basically turning it into, if you eat mushrooms, you can then instantly teleport. And that has no basis in science at all. It's not going to inspire anybody to make anything. It's not going to do something cool. It's just crazy fantasy type stuff in getting into the Star Trek universe. It's not really doing some of the things that Star Trek technology and extrapolation on actual science has done for us. So I think that they really missed an opportunity there to do something by leaving that rule behind, do something that has much more impact and much more benefit than they might have thought. And I'll bank the rest of my time.
All right. Brandon, are you ready for your closing statement, your closing argument?
All right. So the third argument that I had about why these rules that Gene Roddenberry implemented and put into practice didn't work is because Star Trek actually inspires a terrible bit of nationalism. It inspires, and because of this rule that we couldn't have conflict between the crew members and even other planets in the Federation, we now all of a sudden have to create, and this even goes to space pirates. You can't have a space pirate because technically they are members of the Federation. And so we have to find new ways to create villains. We have to find new ways to make people who are the bad guys. So how do we do that? Well, we choose alien races that are different than us. Klingons, they are physically darker in appearance, and they are played off to be brutal and menacing. That adds some implied racism right there. And nationalism, different is bad. Darker is bad. You know, Gene Roddenberry sounds like he was a great guy. He made sure that there was that kiss between Kirk and Uhura, which is problematic in other ways, but I'm not even going to get into those. But his implementation, he made the dark-skinned guys the bad guys. Or how about later? How about in Star Trek, The Next Generation and beyond, in that era? So you get introduced to a race called the Ferengi, who are a little devious race with big ears and big noses that are untrustworthy money handlers. These people, they are solely based off of Jewish stereotypes. They really do. And not just maybe they're based off of Jewish stereotypes. They have two of the main Ferengi that are recurring characters on a main show are played by Jewish people. You've got Quark, who's played by Armin Shimmerman, and Nog, played by Aaron Eisenberg. Romulans, thinly veiled attempt at the yellow thread. They have Mongoloid features, and they are and they're the bad guys, right? So Star Trek has always had a way of saying us good, them bad, inspiring nationalism. Now, you might look at the crew and say, but there's the diversity. Well, it's only a segment of diversity, and it's only the ones who are assimilated to the Federation culture. And you would say, well, they're the ones doing the right thing. Well, I mean, how many times Star Trek even called out Picard for being a white savior. This is not something that's new. Arthur C. Clarke, and I'm just going to, in my closing arguments here, I'm going to rebut some of the things that Ryan said. Arthur C. Clarke, who has his rules and laws that he's written, has said that any sufficiently advanced science, and I wish I had this quote. I lost it when my computer crashed. Any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. So, you know what? It might look like magic, but it could be based in science. It could just be based in science that we don't understand yet. Arthur C. Clarke also says, when a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he's almost certainly right. And when he states that something is impossible, he is probably very wrong. Right there, that tells us, maybe we don't understand everything. Think about the scientific advancements that have been made. And Ryan pointed out that Star Trek has inspired some of them. But think about the ones that they stopped from inspiring. And, Ryan specifically mentioned Star Trek Discovery and the Mycelium Network, which was based off of actual work from a scientist who studies spores. And it talks about how, mycelium does form an enormous network here on Earth. And it's connected to this root structure. And data actually can transfer almost instantaneously through a mycelium network. But we don't understand it very well yet. Maybe it might inspire somebody to do some research on it. So, maybe these spores are quantumly entangled.
30
maybe
seconds.
we learned something from quantum science. Just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Star Trek, while their intentions were good, the implementation of these rules were bad. And I have learned that by staying quiet on these issues and by pretending like I don't see race and I don't see color is actually harmful to people who are different and who are not the default and who are not people who experience the norm. Thank you.
Ryan, your final closing statements. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
And go.
So my last one is also about the crew conflict thing. I don't think that this rule, there's no strong documentation that I could find about an actual quote of the rule, but there's many people that have worked on many Star Trek shows that have accounts of this, that the main characters were not allowed to have conflicts that weren't quickly resolved. I don't think that this rule was specifically about that they couldn't critique the Federation as a whole, as Brandon kind of indicated, that you couldn't that there couldn't be conflict inside the Federation and keeping that kind of utopia thing. Because if you even have the first season of Next Generation, which Roddenberry was doing himself, they had several episodes where there were the evil admirals were the bad guys in the Federation, and that there was conflict with the upper authorities versus the crew that were our main characters. In Star Trek Discovery, they completely abandoned this, in that the crew was very suspicious of each other and had conflicts that lasted the entire season. The captain, the leader of the crew, ended up being the bad guy, and fueled all of the conflict among his crew. And this wasn't really well received by a lot of Star Trek fans. We move on to the second season of Discovery, and they have a new captain, Captain Pike, who is the exact opposite of the captain before. And he goes and to a lot of extent to resolve all of these longstanding conflicts, and the crew starts working together and kind of behaving as a Star Trek crew that we are used to, the one that is more like a family and a team kind of working together. They introduced the crew of the Enterprise under Pike, and it was very much a family from the beginning. And they have the bright colors on that ship, and it's the Star Trek that kind of harkens back to the original series, because that's the crew it's based off of. In the timeline, it's right before that show happens. And then the Discovery crew was all the kind of darker, muted tones. So their personalities, even up to their color schemes, I think they were drawing quite the stark contrast between the two crews. But the Enterprise crew and the way Captain Pike did stuff has become so popular that fans have requested a spin-off of it, and it's been greenlit. They're going to do another Star Trek series that's just about that crew and those adventures that they're going to continue on. And I think a large part of it is because it went back to a Star Trek that was more nostalgic, and people wanted to see that. They're going to continue to do this Discovery how it is, but it's interesting to me that was so popular that they are going to do their own show on it. Actually helped me realize that one of my favorite parts of Star Trek is the utopian side of thing, and is this crew as a family and working together like that. I'm kind of a sucker for those kind of stories. I was really turned off by all of the internal conflict and the stuff that was going on between the crew members. And I really dug the second season more. And I think that was a big part of it, because they became more of a unit. Okay. So Brandon, the mockery of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, what rules would you say that contributed to that? Because I get what you're saying, but I don't connect what rules or what things Roddenberry says that was causing those things.
So so you're actually asking me questions.
I am.
Okay. Okay. So some of the things that contributed to that was largely based off of the conflict, because everybody was of the same mind. Nobody was different. Nobody had really big differences opinions based on their prior worldview. The closest I think that we got to that might have been in Star Trek Voyager, when Tom Paris was kind of an ex-con and he kind of looked at it from there, where you kind of had Maquis on the board, and they looked at it from that worldview. But, Chakotay's race came into it a couple times, but it was never allowed to be some contentious with anybody else. And that made it so that nothing ever had to be explained really or defended.
Okay.
It all just kind of whitewashed it.
Okay. I can see that. I have lots of examples that popped in my head about where they did show some diversity that I will offer. Specifically in Voyager, I think there was a lot. B'Elanna's Klingon heritage came into conflict with the rest of the crew and the whole Maquis thing many times. And the crew kind of, and they did, I don't know if you would consider it whitewashing or harmonizing. They did come to a middle agreement, and they did with the Maquis stuff.
Well, so just before you get too much further down this road, Star Trek Voyager was one of the two series that were created in that era without the consultation of Gene Roddenberry. And after his death in 1991. So I used that as they were trying to hold strong to his rules, but it was not Gene Roddenberry's implementation. So yes, Voyager started dipping their toes in hey, maybe we can try some conflict in Voyager. And it came up with some great stories until they said, hey, DS9, we're going to blow it open. We're going to have Section 51. We're going to do all sorts of things. So that was where I am saying that's where that infinite diversity actually is. Well, yes, it's infinite because it's unlimited, but it's only this section. And we're only talking about the diversity in this section with Gene Roddenberry specifically implemented rules.
Okay. Yeah, even in the ones that Roddenberry had, he had conflict with the wider Federation as a whole. So I don't think that it was, which
was resolved towards the end of the episode.
True.
Even in Measure of a Man, you had the Federation trying to take Data. Well, by the end of it, Bruce was their friend.
Okay.
And he understood. Or when they were trying to take Data's daughter, it started out, Evil Admiral was trying to steal Data's daughter. And at the end, let me help you save your daughter because this is your daughter and I will help you save her. And, that's those were the kind of, yes, you could have conflict with the Federation, but you had to be wrapped up. It could not be overarching.
Okay.
And the sufficiently advanced, that's true. I do like that quote that any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. But if they're not doing stuff that, yes, in 1,000 years, we could be well enough understood and realize that, but we're missing the opportunity to inspire today's technology. Yes, many, many years down the road, when possibly Star Trek is not even relevant anymore, we could understand that. But I don't think there would be any direct correlation between Star Trek inspiring that type of technology that comes out of that as we learn and understand.
Let me ask you, are we that close to transporters?
We transported an atom or two.
So in large scale, though, you think we're that close?
No, but I think we're closer than trying to figure out how to surf on mushrooms.
But would you say the transporter might have happened because of the inspiration that it received from Star Trek? Which, let's be honest, the transporter was a plot line saving. Crap, we can't use a shuttle. How do we get down there? Let's use a transporter.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they didn't want to fly shuttles all the time.
But it is based on relativity and like energy and matter transformation. Like Einstein's theories
the mycelium network's based on quantum entanglement.
No, because so the research that you had, by the way, I was looking at that, and the Dr. Stamets, who the engineer I was named after, was more researching the psychedelic effects of mushrooms, and that's kind of
no. I'm not saying he was
that's
researching how to do it. I'm just saying they looked into it and they found some far-flung theory, which Star Trek always does.
Time is up. on your
Hey,
banked
hang on. I'm not
time.
done here. I'm
I'm
not done.
sorry, sir. Those are the rules. All right.
You opened this can, Luke.
All right. So now we're going to open a brief segment up to the judges. Is there anything that you guys would like maybe a little clarification on before you make your final decisions?
No,
None
I
for
think
me.
both people made very solid, eloquent points at the start. Brandon, I thought that your introductory statement, it was, your 3 points, it was pretty concise. I thought it was well done. Ryan, same. Opening argument was well thought out, and it had a very good, clear path from A to C. I had a little trouble following you in your second part, Brandon, when you started with the rules of infinite cultures and diversity. Your number example makes a good visualization, but I think it was a little detrimental to your overall point, just because it didn't click in how the two related for me until you brought up the Spock point, and I thought the Spock point was excellent. That really consolidated your argument for me. The relationship between Bones and Spock and Kirk and Spock, and how Spock was always the butt of the jokes, was just a very excellent way to bring your argument together. Thought your second argument, Ryan, was your strongest. The rules, talking about how the rules inspired current technology and drive technology forward, and how the mushroom drive was not there. I thought that was excellent point. Finally, Brandon, your round 3 was just an kind of a masterful argument. It really swayed me to your side. And I want to commend you for speaking up when you see something. I think that's something that we all should have learned from the events of the last few weeks in our country, that when you see something, you need to speak up and say that's not right. My only criticism, Ryan, is when you started asking Brandon questions, that really hurt your argument.
Nick, you're up.
All right. So, as a creative person myself, that was the thing that I latched onto the most when you guys were discussing whether or not having rules promoted creativity or not, or like, because it was founded in fact, it inspired technology, or by not having any rules, then you have infinite possibilities of creativity, and maybe we don't understand about it. I was eating that part up, guys, and both of you guys did a great job on your points on that. So I commend you both on that for sure, because I can see definitely the correlation of somebody being inspired by something, being inspired by somebody else's work to to continue on, or by having a clean slate, which is what most people believe. Oh, you're creative, you can just do whatever you want, and you can just come up with stuff out of thin air, which is a misnomer among people who are don't do a lot of creativity. So I really liked both points on that. Yeah, I just like both of your stuff. I'll just leave it there.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, thanks to both of you. I thought that this was a really interesting discussion, and you both made solid arguments. And the real question is, when a creative person creates something and they put it out there in the universe, is it theirs to hold on to and say, these are the rules and everyone should follow them? Or is it better for people to take that and then iterate it upon it themselves? I think that's a classic argument. And, seeing this in focus through the lens of Roddenberry was really interesting. Brendan, I really liked your argument on sort of the meta level, because there's the question, what makes a better TV show, which is a fair question. I think you both argued the merits of, like, well, these are good episodes and so forth, but you both went to this meta level of, then what were the effects of the show outside of the show? And that's where I think the argument really hits its stride. Brendan, your argument that Roddenberry's rules, while well-intentioned and trying to create this sort of 60s utopian idea of racial harmony within the bounds of what was happening in their zeitgeist in the 60s, was well-intentioned, but also made its own forms of nationalism and perpetuated systems of white supremacy that we see today. That is compelling. And I think we need to listen to that. And I was very, very strongly swayed by that. Ryan, your argument that technology is really what this comes down to, and that the emphasis that Roddenberry placed that this must be based in science led to the furthering of humanity. There's something really strong there. And I think that is one of the greatest arguments in favor of Roddenberry and his vision, is that we now have all of these things. And so I want to applaud both of you for making those arguments and just, going through what are some of my favorite episodes and plot lines of Star Trek. I'm glad we got to talk about Section 51. I'm glad we got to talk about the racial aspects of things that were happening on Deep Space Nine. I think in this moment that we are in, anyone who is not thinking about the Deep Space Nine episodes, about both the Bell riots, that episode Far Beyond the Stars should be like at the forefront of a lot of what we were thinking about. Because again, it showed Star Trek is able to adapt to its time. And I think that is an incredibly strong argument. And eventually why, I just feel very compelled to. That's ultimately why I was swayed by Brendan's argument. I feel that art needs to be able to have space to breathe in its own zeitgeist and have it adapt to new things. And yeah, let's have the the Captain Pike Anson Mount series that is very much the classic Trek, but let's have a more nuanced take like Picard as well, and let's have all of that infinite diversity. So that's why I ended up siding on Roddenberry's rules. Good, but good to get outside of them.
All right, Nick.
Well, unfortunately, he basically said exactly what I was going to say.
Oh crap! I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Brandon did a great job of showing how even with the rules and as good as they were intended to be, because of the short-sightedness of the time, it was problematic. And he did a great job of showing that even with all those good intentions, us as a society and us as fans and as people, we need to evolve. And so even with those rules, and they were great and helped us get to the point where now we can evolve more and become better. And so having the rules change and evolve is good. So I side with Brandon.
All right. And Joe?
Well, I mean, it's been decided already, but I also was going to side with Brandon, and the main reason for that was I really liked your argument about technology, Ryan, and I was really with you on how Trek has helped advance our current technology and how these rules keep the focus on the things that allow Trek to be an inspiration to that. But then when you brought in Brandon at the end, and Brandon pointed out that actually the mushrooms, that the Star Trek spores were based on something that we know the mushrooms do, I mean, that just kind of blew it up for me. And his argument about diversity is just so strong.
So we have our winner. He's not here to
Gloat.
to graciously bow, but our winner is Brandon Nuccio from the Fandom Podcast. Yeah, so we have more of these episodes coming, and I would just like to thank every one of you guys that took your time out to do this, to judge us, to make your arguments. I think we can wrap up and just kind of go through, and we'll start with our contestant that's still here to do a little plug of where someone else where they can hear you other than here, and then we'll just move along.
So
Ryab,
yes. Before
Go
that,
ahead.
though,
okay,
Brandon's not going to hear this, and well, I guess I'll hear it later. But
eventually,
that his pursuit of nationalism and the racism stuff has blown my mind. I never noticed that. I never viewed it that way, and I am astonished at myself for not seeing that before now. But yeah,
cool.
Also, to be honest, my actual personal opinion, I think the Roddenberry Rules did more harm than good. I was arguing the opposite side of what I thought.
Extra
But,
point
so
for
yeah.
you.
So yeah, I agree with Brandon on all of the things.
I got confirmation that Brandon can in fact hear us right now. His audio is just a little bit behind.
Okay.
So Ryan,
Yes.
where can people find you?
They can find me where they can find you, at least on the one thing. They can find me at the Nerd Dome Podcast, on Facebook at the Nerd Dome Podcast, or the nerddomepodcast.com, or anywhere that fine podcasts are found.
Awesome. Andy, where can people find you, sir?
Yeah, same deal. Come check out Kiss Your Franchise Goodbye. We are going through the James Bond franchise in a series we are calling On Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. We started with Dr. No. We're about halfway through Roger Moore. Come check it out. And we're also talking about Bond-adjacent movies that aren't quite James Bond, but are kind of like James Bond. So even if you're not a Bond fan, come check it out.
In Like Flint, is that what it was called?
In Like Flint. Yeah, we did an In Like Flint episode. Yep.
That's awesome. Okay, Nick, you will do the plugging for you and Brandon.
Oh, see, this is the hard part. Okay, so I am the co-host with my friend Brandon Nuccio, who's so eloquent and so awesome. We are from the Fandom. The Fandom Podcast. We can be found on Facebook at Fandom Cat, I believe, because we've been trying to consolidate because we had them all on different stuff, and so you can see us at the fandompodcast.com, on Twitter, Fandomcast. Facebook is Fandomcast, I believe now, or it might be the Fandom Podcast. Anyway, come check us out. We have an awesome logo. I did it. No,
awesome. All right. And Joe.
Yeah, you can find me on Tales from the Comic Shop, and I do that with Roger Prowse and Eddie D'Angelini, my awesome co-hosts. What our mission is we kind of want to, there's a lot of false information about the comic industry out there, and we're kind of trying to dispel some of that. We do that by talking to experts and people who actually work in the field, from creators to shop owners to speculators to executives. And both Roger and Eddie have extensive experience in the industry on the creative and business sides. So yeah, come check it out. It's a lot of fun. I'm really proud of it. And you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Anchor. You can find us on iHeartRadio. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, all the usual suspects. And then you can find us on Twitter at comic_tales. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well under Tales from the Comic Shop.
Awesome. And for myself, along with Ryan on the Nerd Dome podcast. I also do a gaming podcast. It's the Push My Buttons Games podcast. We have a Twitch. We've got a YouTube. All you have to do is look up Push My Buttons Games, and you are there. And the absolute best thing about this is every single show that you just heard, you can find on the Geek Nerd Network. You can just go there, find us on Facebook, and you will see the feeds for every single one of these shows. A nice one-stop shop for everything. But again, guys, thank you for coming and sitting through our first episode. We'll get this nice and streamlined, work out all our kinks, and again, thanks for joining us, guys.
This show is part of the Geek Nerd Network. Geek Nerd Network. Find more shows like it at geeknerdnetwork.com. This is Jen.
Hi, I'm Eddie.
I'm Roger.
And I'm Joe from Tales from the Comic Shop.
We want to invite you to take a peek behind the counter and find out the truth about how the comic industry really operates.
From the business side to creative side and all the big inside news straight from the source.
So tune in to Tales from the Comic Shop every week on GNN, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more.